As Oliver took a cautious step forward, the flickering lights danced at the end of the corridor, pulsing like the heartbeat of the house itself. His fingers brushed against the rough wall, feeling the texture beneath his fingertips. The coolness of the stones contrasted sharply with the warmth of his skin, sending a shiver coursing through him. Determined yet apprehensive, he pressed on, his breath coming in short, quick gasps. The whispers wrapped themselves around him again, softer now. He couldn't quite make out the words, but they felt insistent, as though they were encouraging him to move forward, to explore deeper into this strange place. As he walked, the dull thud of his heartbeat filled his ears, drowning out everything except his increasing curiosity and rising dread. With every step Oliver took, he imagined a great adventure unfolding. He thought of pirates and treasures, of mysterious lands far beyond his imagination. Maybe this is like a treasure hunt, he mused, casting his fears aside for a moment. But with each flicker of light, reality seeped back in, a reminder of the eerie energy wrapping around him. He couldn't escape the sensation that he was not alone, even though he could see nothing beyond the shifting shadows. After what felt like hours, Oliver reached the source of the flickering light. It poured from beneath a heavy wooden door, adorned with intricate carvings of mythical creatures, dragons, fairies, and what looked like tiny goblins dancing in the moonlight. The door seemed alive, pulsating with an inviting glow, contrasting starkly with the darkness around it. He hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. "Should I open it?" he whispered to himself. A breeze billowed around his legs, sending chills down his spine. Swallowing his fear, Oliver reached for the handle, which was warm to the touch, almost as if it were waiting for him. With a deep breath, he turned the handle and pushed the door open. It swung inward with a groan, revealing a vast room bathed in shimmering, golden light. The walls shimmered like stars in the night sky, and ceiling hung low, draped with sparkling fabric that looked like a treasure trove. The air smelled sweet, like honey and flowers, making him forget the eerie entrapment of the corridor he had just walked through. Inside, the room was filled with a collection of peculiar objects, strange trinkets and books stacked high upon shelves that reached toward the ceiling. There were globes and maps, strange instruments that Oliver couldn't even begin to identify, and portraits of people whom he did not recognize. Some of the portraits appeared to watch him, their eyes following his every move, giving him goosebumps. He blinked in disbelief, his adventurous spirit igniting with excitement. "What is all this?" he wondered aloud, his voice echoing softly off the walls. As he moved farther into the room, he spotted a large, wooden table in the center, cluttered with dusty books, crystal balls, and tangled wires. On one open book, drawings flickered in and out of view, depicting mythical creatures and mysterious landscapes that seemed to come alive before his eyes. Curiously, Oliver reached out to touch one of the illustrations. The moment his fingers brushed the page, the room filled with a low hum, vibrating under his fingertips. Suddenly, the whispers returned, this time clearer and more welcoming. "Welcome, young traveler," they sang, their tone a mix of warmth and excitement. "You have found the door to knowledge." Caught off guard, Oliver's heart raced, not from fear this time, but from intrigue. "Knowledge?" he echoed, his curiosity piqued. He had always loved stories and adventures, especially tales of heroes and fantastical journeys. "Yes, knowledge. This is a place where dreams and reality intertwine," the voices replied soothingly, enveloping him in a comforting embrace. "You must choose wisely, for every book holds a treasure, but also a duty." "What sort of duty?" he asked, glancing around the room. "Every adventure needs a hero," the whispers replied. "And every hero must face challenges. Will you take the first step?" Oliver looked around, his mind racing. Standing before an array of magical books and artifacts, he felt a sense of great responsibility wash over him. He was not only standing in a magical room, he was being called to the adventure of a lifetime. He thought of his friends and family back home, of how they would marvel at his tales, and his heart swelled with excitement mixed with trepidation. Before he could respond, a bright light shot from the far corner of the room, catching Oliver's attention. It flickered rapidly, revealing a pulsing gem set atop a small pedestal. The gem sparkled like a star, shimmering with countless colors, radiant and alluring. The closer he got, the more he could feel its magic beckoning him. "What is that?" he asked, enthralled. "That, young explorer, is the heart of the room. It holds the essence of the stories waiting to be discovered, the whispers chimed in unison. But touch it only if you are truly ready for the journey ahead. Oliver's heart raced. Was he truly ready? Something deep inside him urged him to reach for the gem. He imagined all the wonderful possibilities waiting for him, the adventures he could embark on. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer to the pedestal, his hand trembling as he reached out. His fingers barely grazed the surface of the gem when a sudden flash of light enveloped him. Oliver gasped as he felt himself being drawn into the glow, the room around him beginning to dissolve into a stream of color. The whispers transformed into a symphony of laughter and wonder, enveloping him as he was pulled away from the cozy familiarity of the old house and into the unknown. "Welcome, Oliver," the voices cried, as he felt his surroundings shift. He closed his eyes, holding on to the joy of anticipation, ready to embrace whatever adventure awaited him. Now, all that mattered was the journey ahead and the stories yet to unfold. The glowing lights ahead flickered like distant stars, entrancing and beckoning, promising an escape from the macabre hallway. Ignoring the growing sense of dread that twisted in his stomach, Oliver quickened his pace. His feet shuffled anxiously against the cold, damp floor, each step echoing off the grimy walls. The air was thick, as if it held its breath, waiting to see what he would do next. Oliver had never felt so lost, so alone. Yet, amid that loneliness, a strange mixture of fear and excitement surged through him, urging him onward. He remembered the laughter of his friends, the warmth of the sun, and the gentle smiles of his family. But here, in this creepy corridor, those warm memories felt worlds away. As he moved further down the corridor, the oppressive darkness began to swirl around him. It seemed almost alive, churning and twisting, wrapping him in a cloak of foreboding that pressed on his shoulders. The flickering lights glimmered just ahead, their soft glow lighting the path. This glow promised safety, but it did little to banish the shadows that crawled closer with each hesitant step he took. They reached out to him like ominous fingers, beckoning for him to stay just a moment longer. The air smelled awful, overwhelmed with the putrid scent of something rotting, something sinister that clawed at the back of his throat. It made him want to gag, but he swallowed hard and pushed forward. Whispers whirled around him, rising in volume, filling his ears with a disconcerting cacophony that filled him with panic and confusion. "Stay with us," one voice hissed. It sounded sweet and almost inviting. "We can show you the truth." Oliver shivered, freezing in place as uncertainty washed over him. He wanted to turn and run, but his feet felt like they were glued to the grimy floor. The enticing call of the sweet voice tugged at his curiosity, wrapping around him like a warm blanket. But then, another voice growled, deep and echoing in a way that made his spine tingle. "Turn back, little boy," it warned, low and guttural. "You do not belong here." Torn between the two captivating yet terrifying voices, Oliver stumbled slightly, nearly losing his footing. "What is this place?" he wondered, his young heart racing. Each time he hesitated, the voices grew louder, echoing like a haunting song through the narrow confines of the corridor. They whispered secrets he was definitely not meant to know. Desire to flee clawed at his insides, shouting for him to turn around and escape the darkness, but the glow of the lights pushed him forward in a haze of confusion. What lay beyond the flickering lights? Was it safety, or something worse? Suddenly, a cold breeze slithered through the corridor. It chilled him to the bone, making his skin prickle. The flickering lights dimmed further, the beautiful glow twisting into something dark and treacherous. The whispers morphed into angry screams, drowning out any sense of reason he clung to. "You will regret this," they cried, melding together into a haunting choir of despair that rattled through his bones. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead, a chill creeping through him, knotting in his stomach. Each breath felt like an effort as he pressed on through the suffocating darkness, desperate to reach the light ahead. But with every stride he took, it felt like the corridor stretched further away, each step dragging him deeper into the abyss of fear. Oliver's heart raced as adrenaline coursed through his veins, fighting the grotesque fear lurking in the shadows, but he couldn't shake it off. Finally, he reached the source of the light. It emerged from a cracked door at the corridor's end. The door shimmered with a warm glow, as if sanctuary awaited him just beyond the threshold. Oliver paused for a moment, feeling an unsettling chill creep down his spine. What awaited him behind this door? With a surge of determination, Oliver reached for the handle. Memories rushed back to him, of his friends laughing, of summer days spent playing outside, and the delights of cookies baked with his mother. Each memory pushed him forward. He needed to escape the cryptic whispers and the evil lurking in the corridor behind him. With a frantic push, he opened the door. Warmth flooded over him, wrapping around him like a soft blanket that chased away some of the darkness. But as he stepped through, reality twisted into something eerily familiar yet wrong. He found himself alone in a dimly lit room that looked like his own bedroom, but the details were distorted and twisted, like a mirage gone terribly awry. The walls were jagged and strange, painted with grotesque images that danced and writhed before his eyes, as if they were alive. Oh, how he longed for his bright and cheerful room, with its bright blue walls and heroic posters. The warmth he felt in the hallway vanished, replaced by the cloying stench of decay that permeated the air. His heart sank quickly. Where were the familiar trinkets, the toys scattered about the floor? The beloved stuffed bear he usually hugged at night was nowhere to be found. Nothing in this place felt right. The whispers resumed, louder than ever before, swirling around him like a storm of voices, calling out and enticing him to join them in eternal night. "Welcome home, Oliver," they hissed, their voices a haunting symphony filling the heavy atmosphere. "Stay forever." Heart racing, Oliver spun around frantically, the shadows around him towering and thickening, closing in like a predator stalking its prey. There was no escape. The door he had come through was gone, replaced by jagged walls that barred his way, impenetrable and threatening, leaving him trapped in a nightmare. The sweet voice emerged again, wrapping around him like a noose. "Join us, dear boy. You can play with us forever. We can have so much fun." Panic tightened its grip as he realized the truth. He was trapped in this malevolent place, and the whispers were not mere echoes of the corridor. They were the voices of those who had ventured into the darkness before him, now lost forever, their souls entwined with the malevolence that presented itself as an inviting home. Oliver fell to the ground, his breath quickening as despair settled like a heavy weight in his chest, pushing down on him. He could feel their presence, a chorus of lost souls, twisted and filled with an unholy hunger for companionship that chilled him right to his bones. Desperate thoughts swirled in Oliver's mind. What if he never saw the sun again? What if he never felt the warmth of his mother's hug? He could almost hear her calling out to him. The thrill of adventure had vanished, replaced with the bone-chilling realization that he might never escape. As the whispers surrounded him, he could almost hear the faint cries of those who had come before, swallowing him whole. Tears welled in his eyes, pouring down his cheeks like rivers of fear. He wanted to shout back at them, to tell them he wasn't afraid, but his voice was stuck in his throat. What good would it do to argue with shadows? They didn't care about his courage. They cared about his despair, about how lost he felt in this twisted version of his world. Suddenly, he remembered something magical, his bravery. Oliver took a deep breath, closing his eyes tightly, and thinking of a way back. His heart might race, but he was still there. The darkness surrounding him could feel his fear, but it could not control him. He had a spark of light that belonged to him, the flicker of hope that told him he was not just a boy. He was Oliver. The boy who loved to explore, the boy who faced the unknown. "Leave me alone," he cried out suddenly, his voice echoing against the walls. Anger ignited a fire within him, burning through the ice of fear that had settled over him. "I don't belong here. I'm not afraid of you." His voice rang out, commanding, resilient, and definitively Oliver. He could feel strength rising within him, pushing back against the smothering darkness. The whispers faltered for a moment, and the shadows flickered. He remembered the strength he found in laughter, in friendships, in love. With a deep breath, he began to visualize his real home. Pictures flooded his mind. His messy bedroom, with books sprawled across the floor, backyard adventures with friends, birthday parties where cake and balloons filled the air with happiness. Oliver thought of the warmth of the summer sun, the laughter of friends, and the love of his family. With each thought, he felt the shadows retreating, their snarling whispers dimming into more distant echoes. "Go back where you came from," he shouted, louder and bolder than before. "I will not stay." The room trembled slightly, and for just a moment, a crack formed in the twisted walls. Light poured into the cracks like golden rays from the sun breaking through clouds. The whispers faded from a roaring chorus to a frightened murmur, panic stealing through the darkness as it recoiled from his burgeoning defiance. In that moment of clarity, he focused on the crack, and his heart surged with determination. "I'm Oliver, and I won't be a part of your darkness," he declared. The shadows shuddered, pulling back as if burned by his words. With mind racing and spirit ignited, he dashed toward the light breaking through the cracks, each step feeling like a leap of faith. "I can do this, asterisk," he thought fiercely, and he pushed. He pushed not just against the jagged walls but against the lingering despair that had tried to chain him. And as he did, the crack grew wider, the light streamed in, stronger and brighter, until the shadows hissed in retreat. Oliver leapt towards the light with every ounce of hope in him. Just before he reached it, as the warmth surged closer, he heard those voices one last time. The sweet voice now turned sour. "You can't escape. You will always belong to us." But their cries fell flat against the warmth of the light coursing through him. With one final burst of energy, Oliver dove into the radiance. In that moment, the darkness screamed and the whispers turned to wails as he broke through to freedom. Oliver landed with a thud on his bedroom floor. Sunshine flooded through the window, casting a golden glow throughout the room, illuminating every corner, every cherished item once lost in his memories. The familiar sights brought tears of relief to his eyes. He remembered who he was and where he belonged. Sitting up, heart still racing, he took a moment to breathe deeply, filling his lungs with clean, fresh air. He hugged his knees tightly, thankful for the safety of his room and the love of his family that awaited him beyond the walls. The shadows had retreated, but he knew they wouldn't just disappear. He had to be vigilant. Oliver stood up slowly and walked to the window. Peeking outside, he felt the warmth of the sun on his face, the soft breeze swirling around him, carrying the joyful sounds of laughter. His friends were playing outside, having fun without him. But now, he was ready to join them. With a heart full of courage and hope, Oliver bounded down the stairs and out of the door, leaving the memory of the whispers behind in the safe embrace of sunlight and friendship. No darkness could keep him from the light again. Time seemed to have stopped, like a clock lost in the middle of a midnight fog, in a room that was wrapped in shadows and drenched in despair. Oliver stood there, feeling the darkness creep around him like a heavy blanket, cold and unyielding. It felt like it was squeezing him tightly, making it hard to breathe, as if the very air turned to thick syrup. The room felt like a prison, its dark corners whispering secrets he couldn't comprehend. The whispers were like a chilling lullaby, a haunting song that nestled deep in his mind, filling him with fear and an aching sorrow. He wanted to cry out, but his voice felt swallowed by the weight of despair surrounding him. "Why did you come here?" A voice suddenly pierced the silence, its tone colder than the icy wind that seemed to swirl in the shadows. This voice echoed from every corner of the room, making Oliver shiver and tremble. "You should have known better." With his heart racing, Oliver shut his eyes tight, wishing he could shut out everything, the ominous whispers, the creeping shadows, and the suffocating despair. In his mind, he tried to summon up memories of laughter and joy, memories like sunlit days at the park or his mother's warm hugs. But those happy times felt far away, like shadows slipping through the cracks of his memory. The echoes of his joyful past were absorbed by the heavy gloom that surrounded him. All he could feel now were shadows, rising from the corners of the room and whispering tales of sorrow, stories he felt he was fated to inherit. Suddenly, from the deepest shadows, a figure began to form. It moved in jerky, unnatural motions that made Oliver's stomach turn. The figure was distorted, like a scary reflection in a cracked mirror. It brought with it a horrible smell, like damp earth and rotten leaves, as if it had crawled from the depths of a forgotten grave. The face of this creature was a mask of twisted sorrow, mirroring the darker parts of Oliver's own fears. It seemed to show him a warning. This was what he could become if he let the darkness take hold. "Join us, little one," it pleaded, its words dripping like thick, red blood from its crooked mouth. "We're never alone here. We share in the eternal silence." Oliver felt a surge of despair clenching at his heart, threatening to pull him down into a pit of hopelessness. But deep inside, he felt a flicker of defiance burst forth, like a candle lighting up in a dark room. If this was what awaited him, he would stand firm. "Leave me alone," he shouted, his voice ringing out forcefully against the oppressive gloom. The creature's distorted grin only widened, revealing jagged teeth that shone like silver blades in the dim light, its unsettling smile making Oliver's insides churn. "What's the matter, dear boy? You think you can escape?" it hissed, its voice transforming from something deceptively soothing into something a nightmare would conjure, cold and malevolent. The very walls pulsed as if they were alive, shifting closer and closer around him. The whispers grew louder, swirling into a storm of sound that drowned out his own thoughts. Oliver pressed his hands hard against his ears, trying to block out the chaotic sounds. He squeezed his eyes shut tighter, wishing desperately for it all to vanish. "I want to go home," he cried, his voice a raw plea that echoed in the cold, damp air. But the darkness merely chuckled, a sinister sound that seemed to dance around him like smoke. "Home is here now," the creature hissed, its voice holding a twisted delight. "The corridor chose you, Oliver. You are one of us." Hot tears of anguish filled Oliver's eyes. He thought of his mother's warm embrace, and how she always made him feel safe, like nothing could touch him. She was the shield against the darkness, and with every heartbeat, that memory glimmered brighter in his mind like a beacon of hope. Reduced to a small flicker, it still flickered, pushing against the overwhelming despair that loomed over him. Driven by a sudden surge of bravery, Oliver darted for the last place he remembered the door had been, his heart pounding with foolish hope. Maybe it would magically appear again. But the air was thick, almost alive, the corridor folding in on itself like a monstrous beast. The echoes of laughter morphed into a chaotic symphony of torment and despair, loud and relentless, wrapping tightly around his hopes and dreams. "No, please," he begged, his voice almost lost in the cacophony. The laughter surged, growing louder, wrapping around him like a vicious serpent ready to strike. The walls pulsated and throbbed, each beat a cruel reminder of his entrapment, mocking his desperate plea for release. In that critical moment, it became painfully clear. This dark corridor was not just a trap, it was determined to consume him. The black tendrils of despair began to slither closer, wrapping around his ankles like cold, dead vines pulling him down. The whispers morphed into a clamor of voices, a horrifying blend of pleas and demands, creating an unholy symphony that echoed in the dim room. "Eternal darkness awaits, little boy," they sang, their voices weaving together in a chorus of despair that filled the air around him. "Embrace the night." Oliver staggered backward, overwhelmed by the weight of their words. He felt himself teetering on the ragged edge of madness, like a tightrope walker in a storm. At that moment, when everything felt like it was closing in on him, he inhaled deeply, summoning every ounce of strength he had left. "I won't let you consume me," he shouted, his words bursting forth with the fiery strength of desperation. But the shadows laughed. Oh, how they laughed! It was a low, growling sound that sent icy chills racing down his spine. They tightened their grip on him, holding him in place, pinning him down like a small animal caught in a hunter's grasp. Panic clawed at his insides, filling him with terror so profound that it felt like a storm brewing in his chest, ready to explode. The room began to distort. The walls twisted and turned, spinning around him as if the very foundation of reality was crumbling. Oliver's breath came in quick gasps, his heart pounding furiously in his chest. He was losing the last fragments of reality, the comforting blanket of his thoughts slipping away. The whispers reached a merciless crescendo, a storm of voices drowning his own cries, and he could feel himself teetering on the edge of a chasm. Suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way, a yawning abyss swallowing him whole. Oliver let out a frightened scream as he plunged into the darkness, his spirit filled with fear and desperation. As he fell, his memories flashed before his eyes like flickering lights, his mother smiling at him, the sound of laughter, and moments of pure joy. But just as quickly, they all faded away, consumed by the consuming blackness that enveloped him. He felt like he was falling forever, weightless and lost, tumbling through an endless void. Panic surged through him as he reached out, desperate to grab onto something, anything to pull himself back. But no hands reached for him, only the cold darkness answered, wrapping around him like a shroud. Then, just as he thought he could fall no longer, a light appeared in the distance, a soft, warm glow that beckoned to him, filled with hope. Oliver focused on the light, holding onto it like a lifeline. He fought against the darkness, pushing upward toward that shining beacon, heart racing with determination. As he soared through the shadows, he realized this fight wasn't just a struggle for his body, but for his very soul. With every ounce of strength he could muster, he resisted the pull of despair, reaching for the light with all his might. "I'm coming," Oliver shouted, his voice filled with pure courage. And as the light grew brighter, he felt himself being pulled upward, leaving behind the cold blackness that sought to drag him to the depths of despair. It was a battle against shadows, and he was determined to win. And as he raced toward the warmth, he could almost hear the laughter of joy, ringing clearer and brighter, just beyond the darkness. With one final push, he felt himself breaking through, the weight of despair lifting as the light engulfed him, wrapping him in its warm embrace like the arms of a long-lost friend. Oliver blinked against the brightness, a tear slipping down his cheek, feeling hope spark back to life within him. "Welcome back, Oliver," a gentle voice whispered as the light softly faded, revealing a scene he thought he'd lost forever, the warm glow enveloping him like a hug. And though shadows still loomed around him, he knew now that he could find the strength to stand tall against them. No longer would he simply be a shadow of the past, he would rise, defiant, ready to take on whatever darkness awaited. Falling through the void, Oliver's mind whirled like a leaf caught in a wild wind, swirling through a storm of thoughts and feelings. It felt as if he were tumbling through a night sky, heavy darkness surrounding him like a thick blanket that seemed to wrap around him tighter with each passing moment. He wanted to scream, but the blackness smothered his voice, stealing the sound before it could escape. Everything felt strange and distant. It was as if he were floating in a world that had lost all its colors, a place where the bright sunshine and cheerful sounds of laughter could no longer reach him. He was alone in this vast emptiness, drifting further and further away from the reality he once knew. With each beat of his heart, fear swelled in his chest like a balloon ready to burst, drowning out every other feeling. Could he even remember what joy felt like? His thoughts raced in a chaotic dance, fighting against the very real and heavy pull of despair that tugged at him like a giant wave crashing onto shore. Then, suddenly, he felt a harsh jolt, as if the ground had decided to catch him unawares. He crashed onto a surface that felt cold and unyielding, knocking the breath from his lungs as he gasped, trying to fill his chest with air again. The icy chill spread through him, wrapping around his bones and numbing him to his core. The shadows, those wicked shapes, moved closer, circling him like hungry wolves waiting to pounce on unsuspecting prey. He lay there, confused and frozen, staring into the thick darkness that stretched endlessly before him. All he could see was more blackness, yawning wide like the mouth of a great beast. After taking a moment to catch his breath, he pushed himself up, trembling slightly. As he became more aware of his surroundings, his heart began to race once more. Before him lay a labyrinthine world, where grotesque figures danced in the flickering shadows, twisting and bending in odd shapes that defied any understanding. It was disconcerting. They seemed to be alive yet not alive, marionettes controlled by hands invisible to him. The whispers of forgotten souls fluttering through the air created an unsettling atmosphere that made his skin crawl. Each figure seemed to embody despair, reminding him of the fate that awaited him if he stayed here, lost in this twisted maze with no way out. The air around him was thick with the foul scent of decay, as if something rotten lay hidden just beyond his view. It turned his stomach, making him feel queasy. Each breath he took felt heavier than the last, like he was inhaling the darkness itself which pressed against him, demanding that he give in and surrender to the abyss. "Join us, Oliver," the voices cooed around him, sweet yet sinister. Their laughter rang in a mocking way, echoing the happy memories of his past. He remembered fun times spent with friends, moments of laughter and joy that now felt surreal, as if they belonged to someone else. But one thing was crystal clear in his mind: he had to escape. Panic surged through him like a wild river, and with it came a fierce determination. "I won't, I can't," he shouted, his voice breaking as raw emotions bubbled up, spilling from him like a primal scream. He could feel his defiance hanging in the air like a thin ribbon, ready to snap under the weight of their haunting despair. "Futile, little boy," the shadows hissed, slithering closer with every passing moment, their very presence smothering him. "You are part of us now." The words wrapped around him like a chain, pulling him down, urging him to accept his fate. In a moment of sheer desperation, Oliver turned away from their taunting whispers and raced deeper into the dark. His heart thudded loudly, a relentless drumbeat urging him to run faster, to flee from the sounds of laughter that echoed all around him. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, a menacing snare that threatened to trap him for all eternity. With each footfall, the walls pulsed as if they were alive, responding to his panic with a sinister rhythm. But as he ran, the laughter morphed. It turned into a low growl, deep and rumbling like thunder gathering strength in a storm. Fear rushed through him, surging in his veins, fueling his legs to go even faster, driven by a natural instinct to survive. I have to get out, he thought and pushed himself forward, tears streaming down his cheeks. He was seeking an escape he hoped was just ahead, but deep down, he feared it might never come. Stay. The voices wailed, their pleading turns into horrifying shrieks that clawed at his mind, trying to pull him back. He stumbled into the endlessness of the corridor, and suddenly, a gaping maw emerged before him, a dark splintered mouth waiting to devour him whole. Just as he was about to be swallowed by the void, there was a blinding flash of white light, so bright it momentarily reshaped the impossibly twisted landscape around him. In that glaring instant, he glimpsed something truly shocking. Faces, countless faces of those lost, yearning to escape from this dark realm. Their features were twisted in agony, their mouths moving as they reached out toward him, calling for his help. "Help us!" they screamed, their cries filled with desperation, echoing in his ears like a haunting melody. But then, just as quickly as the light had appeared, it receded once more, pulled back by the shadows that hungered for him, engulfing him in darkness again. Trembling now, Oliver stepped back, dread washing over him like a cold wave. A horrible realization settled in his mind: he was not the first to be trapped in this mournful place. Countless souls had wandered here before him, lost and unable to find their way back. Forever trapped, an overwhelming sense of doom filled him as he understood the chilling truth. If he couldn't find a way out, he would become nothing more than another lost shadow in the darkness. The laughter he had feared returned, now a cacophony of madness that rose in volume, drowning out any sliver of hope he had left. It mixed with whispers that seemed to reach for him, weaving through the shadows, suffocating him with their pain. Despair weighed heavily upon him, pressing down like a leaden weight. It was crushing, forcing him to face the bleak truth that he truly had nowhere left to turn. "Forever," they whispered, a soft but terrifying chant as the darkness wrapped around him tightly like a heavy blanket. "You will never escape. You belong to the corridor now." With every word, Oliver felt the walls of this wicked space closing in on him, crushing him from all sides. The last remnants of light flickered, died, and he was consumed by the shadows swirling around him. His cries blended with those of the countless souls trapped in the same fate, creating a haunting symphony of despair that echoed endlessly through the depths of the darkness. In the endless stretch of the corridor, where no light could penetrate, Oliver drifted deeper into the abyss. There was no hope left in his heart, no way to escape, only the whispers, loudly repeating the sorrow of lost souls. They echoed around him, growing louder and more insistent, a never-ending reminder of what he had once been. A boy full of dreams, now trapped in a haunting echo of the light he would never reach again. As he ventured further into the abyss, he couldn't help but feel that he was becoming just another ghostly shadow, destined to wander endlessly with those who were lost before him. Yet, even in the depths of despair, a small flicker of courage began to grow within Oliver's heart. Perhaps this wasn't the end. In the face of the overwhelming darkness, he thought of the love, laughter, and warmth that had once surrounded him. Could those memories be enough to guide him back? Could they light a path through this abyss of shadows? The battle between hope and despair raged fiercely within him, urging him to hold on a little longer. He had to believe that there was a way to break free, a sliver of light that would help him escape the shadows and finally return home. With every ounce of strength he could gather, Oliver whispered back to the void, "I am not lost yet. I will fight." These words pushed against the night, an unyielding spark in an engulfing sea. He closed his eyes, focusing on that thin thread of hope, sending it out into the dark around him like a beacon. As he held on to that thought, the shadows seemed to waver, flickering as if disturbed by his defiance. "You belong to the abyss," they hissed, but Oliver clenched his fists tighter, determined to forge his path through the darkness. There were echoes of laughter in the distance, but this time, they didn't feel mocking. They felt like encouragement, like a gentle hand tugging him back from the edge. The journey would be difficult, but even in his darkest moment, Oliver chose to believe there was a way out. And with that belief nestled safely in his heart, he took a courageous step into the unknown. The corridor may have been endless and terrifying, but it would never steal his spirit. He would find his way back to the light, one step at a time. And somehow, he would prove that darkness cannot claim a heart filled with hope. The laughter changed, transformed from sinister to supportive, and Oliver took another step forward, ready to face whatever came next. In this battle for his freedom, he was ready to discover the true strength of his spirit.